So thank you for that. Good evening. Welcome to the March 12th meeting of the Lynbrook Board of Education. If we all can please rise for the pledge of the flag. Mr. Pileski. Roll call. Everyone is present for approval of minutes. If there are no changes, may I have a motion to accept the minutes of the February 12th regular meeting? Ms. Danilo, second. Mr. Aragano. All in favor? May I have a motion to accept the minutes of the February 25th special meeting? Me too. Ms. Danilo, second. Mr. Luna. All in favor? And the March 4th budget session? Ms. Flesh, Mr. Luna, all in favor? Mr. Kunz, art gallery, please.
The drawing and painting students of Mr. Kunz and Mr. Senna proudly present Light and Shadow, a study in still life, an exhibition celebrating the timeless art of still life drawing through their expressive mediums of Conte crayon and charcoal. Still life drawing has long been a fundamental practice in art, allowing students to refine their ability to observe, compose, and render form with precision. By carefully studying objects in controlled lighting, artists develop a deeper understanding of proportion, value, and texture, skills that serve as the foundation for all forms of visual expression. This exhibition features two distinct yet complementary approaches to still life drawing. The Conte crayon drawings capture the delicate transparency and reflective surfaces of glass jars, bottles, and bowls. Conte, which is rich in earthy tones and smooth blending capabilities, allows for nuanced variations in light and shadow, emphasizing the complexity of refraction and transparency. In contrast, the charcoal drawings focus on a variety of objects, highlighting bold contrasts, deep shadows, and dramatic forms. Charcoal's velvety texture and ability to produce soft transitions and stark lines make it a powerful tool for exploring volume and depth. Together, these works showcase the artist's growing mastery of observation, mark making, and value structure. Through the use of Conte crayon and charcoal, students push the boundaries of their materials to capture the essence of light, texture, and form. Light and Shadow is a testament to their dedication to the practice of still life drawing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kunz. Dr. Lynch, presentations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Belmont. So tonight I'm going to announce the worst kept secret in Lynbrook. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our valedictorian and salutatorian. But before I say the names that you all know already, I want to just read one quote that was in the online, our press release, because I think it's just such a wonderful Lynbrook way that these two people think about each other. So, the valedictorian and salutatorian share a strong bond as part of a tight-knit group at LHS. It's rewarding to see each other grow on this successful track. We help each other out. That is about the most hourly thing I've ever heard a valedictorian and salutatorian say. So I'm really proud of that. Just a really wonderful thing. So without further ado, valedictorian Kate Santoli and salutatorian Eric Diaz. Okay, so we're also proud to announce a middle school student from South, Allison Wong, has won first place in a Women in Science Challenge. That is out of Mrs. Guider's class. So she did a wonderful presentation about women in science, and she took a good look at don't you hate when this happens? You know what I need? She had done something that was thank you, Katherine Johnson, and who was so important to the NASA program. So she did a whole highlight of that career, and so we just want to make sure that we bring her up and wish her great success in the future. So Allison, if you want to come on up. Okay. Tonight, we're also proud to honor our Horizon staff. As you know, it is a much lauded high school, one of the most lauded high school newspapers in Nassau County. So this year's awards, most outstanding newspaper, first place went to Horizon. Most outstanding reporter, honorable mention, Gianna Longo. Best arts review, Miranda Mangru. And best news article, honorable mention, Emily Franklin. So I know, I don't think Gianna and Emily are in attendance tonight, but everyone come on up for a t-shirt along with a good moderator. I see her hiding in the back. Don't you want Ms. Sanders to come up? Okay. So for the last few years, we've had a wonderful partnership with our local Elks organization, and I'm going to call up the Elks to, I think they have a little presentation that they want to talk about. So if you guys would want to come, you can have that microphone and you can tell them what it's all about.
My name is John Nuzzi, Past District Deputy, Grand Exalted Ruler from New York Elks Lodge number 1. Remember, this Elks Lodge has been in this community since 1924. I need to thank right off the bat for having us here tonight. With us is Bill Bach, our Exalted Ruler, Lisa Moldovan, our New York State Trustee, and I have 2 Past Exalted Rulers, Paul and Amy Schneller. I first met Paul a couple of years back when we gave out awards. We do it every year for a boy and a girl at the awards ceremony. And the last 2 years, it was great that we were able to have our 53rd hoop shoot this year at one of the schools. We had almost 300 children involved. We went to district, nationals, and we turned around and we went to state with 1 winner. Took 3rd place. But Paul, I'd like you to come up. The other guy. No, the other guy is Joe.
On behalf of the officers and members
interesting group of individuals. That's an interesting group of individuals right there. That's pretty impressive stuff. They've been here a long time. Been here like
I
100
have
years.
one other here. This individual, I'm sure everybody that's in athletics knows. This is the 8-8. This is for Joseph. So, on behalf of the Elks, if Paul and the board would present this to Joe, the athletic director. Yes, we did great. Thank you so much.
All right.
And I just want to thank, it's not, I accept this on my own behalf, but really, I've been at the Elks, and the people that do the real work are our phys ed teachers, because they are prepping the kids. I mean, especially the elementary guys and the ladies. So they are the ones doing the real work. So I'm glad this is recorded, because I don't want to accept anything in my own name. I'll only accept it on behalf of our whole staff that does it all.
Let me enlighten everybody here.
All right.
4 of your local teachers received awards that night.
Great.
During the hoop shoot. That was fantastic, and they've worked with me for the last 4 years.
Yeah, great.
But thank you so much. Teresa, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll throw it back to you, Mr. Belmont.
Good evening. Typically, we have our retirements done in last month, but we're going to do, I guess it's bittersweet. It's always sad for us when we lose that much talent, but it's good for them that they get to move on to their next phase. We actually have 4 tonight. If Trudy Amadeo could please stand up.
Whereas Mrs. Trudy Amadeo, elementary teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2025, after 34 years of service to the principals, staff, students, and parents of Marion Street Elementary School. And whereas Trudy has had the privilege of spending her entire teaching career in the Lynbrook schools, after completing her student teaching at Marion Street, she began her first classroom experience eager to teach first grade. In addition to teaching young learners, Mrs. Amadeo took on the role of co-director of the 5th grade drama production. The extensive time spent preparing students for the plays laid the groundwork for her transition to teaching 5th grade after 7 years in primary education. Mrs. Amadeo has dedicated much of her career to learning with her students while creating a warm and affectionate environment. And whereas Mrs. Amadeo's committee work at both the building and district levels has been exemplary, she has demonstrated leadership while advocating for increased support for our students. She's embraced every new initiative and evaluated how and what to teach. Her roles have included being a member of Compact Committee, a respected grade level chair, providing staff development for her colleagues on new curriculum initiatives, and participating in the Health and Wellness Committee. And whereas Mrs. Trudy Amadeo actively seeks new learning opportunities for her students, she was instrumental in the early implementation of a pilot push-in teaching model. Collaborating closely with her colleagues, she implemented station teaching and learning experiences to create smaller classrooms within larger ones. Unbeknownst to her, she became a pioneer of the integrated co-teach instructional model in the Lynbrook schools. Mrs. Amadeo consistently sets high expectations for her students while presenting a rigorous curriculum. All students thrive in her classroom, where they are always met with kindness, constant encouragement, and genuine care. Whereas it is no surprise that Trudy was recognized and honored on the Superintendent's Honor Roll early in her career. Mrs. Amadeo always offers her students the very best of herself and acknowledges the credit they deserve. While the thousands of students she taught may forget the specifics of the curriculum, they will never forget and will always appreciate how she made them feel. And whereas the Board of Education expresses its gratitude to Mrs. Trudy Amadeo for her dedicated service to Lynbrook schools and extends its best wishes for a fulfilling and healthy retirement alongside her husband Vic and companions Thelma, Louise, and Houdini, Mrs. Amadeo plans to enjoy her retirement years engaging in activities such as walking on the beach, reading, and practicing yoga. That sounds really nice, actually. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Trudy Amadeo for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2025. Congratulations.
Mr. Robert Claravi, please stand up.
Whereas Mr. Robert Colarafi, band teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced his intention to retire effective June 30th, 2025, close of business, after 36 years of service to the principals, staff, students, and parents of the Lynbrook schools. And whereas Robert Colarafi began his teaching career in Lynbrook in 1989, initially serving as the North Middle School band instructor and part-time orchestra instructor at West End, Mr. Colarafi embarked on a mission to expand our band program and was affectionately known as the Music Man. His dedication and passion for music education led to early success in his career. As a proficient saxophonist, Mr. Colarafi has been a role model for his musicians and has inspired numerous students. And whereas, under Mr. Colarafi's leadership, the middle school band program flourished, Mr. Colarafi consistently sought to achieve the perfect John Philip Sousa band sound with all his performing groups. During his tenure, he initiated the first jazz band at North Middle School. Mr. Colarafi embraced the opportunity to develop the elementary band program when he transitioned to Waverly Park. Since 2012, Mr. Colarafi has educated thousands of students at Waverly Park and Marion Street, teaching them to play new instruments. His commitment to instilling a love of music, demonstrating exceptional skill, and assisting students in understanding content has been truly commendable. And whereas, in addition to his teaching duties, Mr. Colarafi has been actively engaged in various school activities. He has moderated the student council and environmental clubs at North Middle School and participated in staff volleyball at Waverly Park. His involvement in these activities has enriched the school community and created a supportive and engaging environment for students and staff alike. And whereas, Mr. Colarafi has brought energy and unmistakable enthusiasm to his role as an elementary band teacher, whether supervising lunch duty on the microphone, directing concerts, or inspiring students. His passion for music and education has always been evident. His dedication and spirited presence have left a lasting impact, and his resonant voice will be remembered in the Waverly Park and Marion Street communities. And whereas the Lynbrook Board of Education sincerely thanks Robert Colarafi for his 36 years of service and commitment to the Lynbrook Public Schools and wishes him a happy and healthy retirement. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Robert Colarafi for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2025.
Claudia Hetzel, please stand up.
Whereas Mrs. Claudia Hetzel in the Lynbrook Union Free School District has announced her intention to retire effective March 31st, 2025, close of business, after 29 years of service to the principals, staff, students, and parents of Marion Street Elementary School. And whereas Claudia Hetzel has greatly contributed to the education of our youngest learners, spending her entire career educating students in grades 1 and 2 at Marion Street. She has actively supported every initiative and demonstrated a strong passion for literacy, math, science, and character education curricula. Ms. Hetzel consistently engaged with staff to establish a nurturing and academically enriching classroom environment. Over the years, she has been an integral part of several successful co-teaching teams. And whereas Mrs. Hetzel actively sought opportunities to engage with students beyond the classroom and support the entire school community. Over the years, she has enjoyed interacting with students within the school setting. One of her initial roles upon joining the Marion Street staff was serving as the co-director of the Grade 5 drama production. Ms. Hetzel has also channeled her passion for writing by organizing the After-School Writers Club. Additionally, she contributed as an advisor to the Marion Street school newspaper, The Chatterbox. And whereas Mrs. Hetzel has exemplified exceptional school spirit through her active involvement in various activities. She has supported PTA basketball and volleyball games as a cheerleader, participated as a model in the Marion Street Fashion Show, and as a runner in the community event Fly with the Owls. Furthermore, Ms. Hetzel has demonstrated outstanding organizational skills by coordinating Marion Street Sunshine activities and collaborating with colleagues to plan family math nights. And whereas Mrs. Hetzel has demonstrated commitment and enthusiasm throughout her teaching career. She consistently embraced curriculum initiatives and provided support to her students, ensuring that every child can achieve academic mastery. Her passion for teaching first and second grade shines through. Mrs. Hetzel has dedicated herself fully to the development of young children, offering nurturing guidance and building their confidence. Mrs. Hetzel and her students will always cherish the valuable memories of their time spent together. And whereas the Board of Education expresses its gratitude to Ms. Claudia Hetzel for her dedicated service to the Lynbrook schools and extends its best wishes for a fulfilling and healthy retirement alongside her husband, Carl, children, Nicole and Matt, her parents, and many extended family members. Mrs. Hetzel will enjoy her retirement years, enjoying the beauty of life alongside her husband, taking long walks, and finding time to travel with her family. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Claudia Hetzel for purposes of retirement, effective March 31st, 2025.
So we have one more, but I can't help but think as she sits there crying a little bit about the bittersweet nature of retiring, we're about to lose about 140, so I do quick math, about to let 140 years of experience go out the door, which is really amazing when you think about, the fact that people change jobs all the time, and there's just something about Lynbrook where we keep people here for such a long period of time. You realize how that's an emotion. You've been coming to a place for 30-something years of your life. It's a long time to do it. So it's sad to see you go and to all of you go, but we know the next chapter of your life be one that you enjoy. So for this next one, who I can't believe this guy got 33 years in here, but Bill Laley, stand on up. Guess with that beard, you're definitely looking for retirement. Whereas Mr. William Laley, esteemed social studies teacher and respected coach in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced his intention to retire effective June 30th, 2025, after an extraordinary 33-year career in Lynbrook High School. And whereas Mr. Laley has been a pillar of the Lynbrook High School faculty, inspiring thousands of students with his deep knowledge, unwavering dedication, and passionate teaching, having taught nearly every social studies course offered in the school with a profound and lasting impact in advanced placement economics. And whereas Mr. Laley has been more than just an educator, he's been a mentor, a role model, and a source of unwavering support for his students, always fostering an environment where learning thrives and students feel valued and challenged to reach their full potential. And whereas, as Dr. Barbarino observed during Mr. Laley's tenure review, Mr. Laley demonstrates to students that he is genuinely interested in their well-being, and students respond with respect and admiration, a testament to the deep connections he has built throughout his career. And whereas former Social Studies chairperson Mr. Glenns once noted that Mr. Laley's rapport with the students is excellent, and his overall enthusiasm makes for an outstanding educational atmosphere, highlighting the unique ability he possesses to make history come alive and economics engaging for students. And whereas, beyond the classroom, Mr. Laley has shaped the lives of countless student athletes through his unwavering commitment to Lynbrook athletics. His tenure in the football program, and most notably, his leadership in the lacrosse program, has left an enduring legacy. As part of the lacrosse coaching staff, Mr. Laley secured an impressive 7 conference championships, 15 Big Four championships, 5 Nassau County championships, 3 Long Island championships, and 2 state championships, setting a standard of excellence in sportsmanship for generations to come. Whereas Mr. Laley's devotion to the Lynbrook community extends beyond the classroom and playing fields, as evidenced by his decision to raise his own children in the district, reinforcing his belief in the value of Lynbrook's educational and athletic programs. And whereas Mr. Laley's colleagues, students, and athletes alike have long admired his passion, integrity, and unwavering commitment, making him a respected leader, a cherished friend, and an irreplaceable part of the Lynbrook family. And whereas the Board of Education extends its deepest gratitude to Mr. Laley for his years of exceptional instruction, leadership, and mentorship, recognizing that his influence will continue to be felt in the halls of Lynbrook High School for years to come. Whereas the Board of Education wishes Mr. Laley a well-deserved retirement filled with the joys of reading, relaxation, and time spent with his beloved family, his wife Danielle, and their children, Lynbrook High School alumni Emma, 22, Peyton will be 25, Aiden, 27, and Reed, 31, Bill, as he embraces the next chapter of his life. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts with profound appreciation and admiration the resignation of Mr. William Laley for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2025. If we could get those 4 retirees to come up for a photo, please. Moving on with the meeting, we have reports from trustee, policy committee, Mr. Murray.
Today we just have the official first reading of our new student member of the school board, which is a new state law. And again, thank you to the AP government class for their role in helping us put that policy together. And I believe, I think that's it for tonight.
Second read, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have it. And then we have second readings of school district records policy and school safety plans and teams. And again, those are just in response to updates to state law.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I'm going to waive that motion. Mrs. Kelly, DEI liaison.
Hello. Last Thursday, the DEI Council met and had an open discussion regarding how to move forward in our efforts to promote student belonging. The recommendation was made to move this important work from the DEI Council toward the building levels and to create a standing item of belonging on the agenda of each compact, our shared decision-making committee meetings. Members said that this move makes sense because these meetings incorporate all constituents, including students at the high school level, and can address specific student needs in more detail for each specific building. The way that compact functions was also considered ideal, since members bring ideas back to the constituencies that they represent before decisions are made. A member also shared that SEL will also become a standing item at compact, further reinvigorating that committee. To keep a level of district oversight, it was suggested that the Board of Education reestablish its annual meeting with Compact and that suggestions from the compacts be considered annually by the PTA Curriculum Committee as well. The conversation then shifted towards equity issues regarding the cost of certain field trips, events, and school supplies. The possibility of offering more in-house field trip opportunities and assemblies, fundraising, and polling parents to solicit opinions regarding options were among the suggestions made. This last item, polling the parents, that will be further explored at the final DEI Council meeting, which is scheduled for May 1st. So we would look to send more information about that after that date. And as always, thank you to everyone who participates in those committees. Thank you.
Mr. Lunar, PTA.
Okay, I have four separate announcements for the PTA. First, the PTA Council has created 2 additional $1,000 Fly with the Owl scholarships for our graduating seniors. For those who are interested in applying, applications are due on Friday, March 21st, and the applications are available through guidance or on Council's website. So if anyone's interested in applying for that scholarship, please do so. You have about another week and a half to do so. Second, Parent University is coming up next week on Wednesday, March 19th. The topic of this session is actually something very topical: empowering parents with tools to help their child manage anxiety, stress, and time. The event will take place at the high school. Doors open at 6:30, and the event will begin at 7 o'clock. There's going to be a flyer that's coming out soon, so look out for that. Third, Council was happy to send 2 PTA representatives to join the Board of Ed and Administration at the Refit Legislative Breakfast last Friday, where we all worked together to advocate for the benefit of our students with our elected representatives. The PTA has really been doing very good work in terms of just liaising with legislative leaders and representatives in the community with a lot of the issues that have been circulating around lately. And finally, PTA is looking forward to hosting the staff volleyball game on Friday, April 25th at 7 p.m. New for this year, the Universal PK will have a team that's going to join in on the fun. That should be a lot of fun. And that's all we have for today.
Thank you, Mr. Lunar. Anything else from the trustees? Any attendance at events or anything of interest?
I
I know he mentioned the refit conference on Friday. I went, and Lynbrook had great representation. I went with Dr. Lynch, Mr. Press, Mrs. Pignataro, and Mrs. Davies from the PTA, along with Mr. Kirschenberg. So basically what it was is it was a bunch of local school districts, and we met with about 6 local legislators. It was a question and answer forum, and the legislators discussed topics such as foundation aid, free lunch for all, BOCEs, charter schools, and the Federal Department of Education. I felt like it was actually a really good breakfast. I felt like the legislators really had a great pulse on what, problems the Long Island districts are facing. I think it was really nice, a lot of the conversations that we have here when we talk about foundation aid and not having enough money, it's nice to know that they're actually listening and they're understanding, and that it's not just a Lynbrook issue, it's a Long Island, New York issue. But I left really positive that they're going to go to Albany and fight for us, and I hope I'm not just being optimistic. I think that was really how I left feeling. And I will say, since the meeting on Friday, I know that PTA is actively working on drafting a letter to send to our local representatives. The letter will be available for community members to also be able to send. It's not done yet, but I'm sure when the letter is done, they'll somehow get it out to community members, and you guys can send letters as well. But I think it was a really positive event, and I'm hopeful.
Thank you, Mr. Argon. All right, so moving on to old business under budget adoption. At our March 4th budget work session, the administration presented an unbalanced budget, but since that time, they have worked hard to actually close that gap and present us with a balanced budget tonight. So, Dr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Belmont. Joe, and yes, thank you, Mrs. Aragona, for attending refit, and then Mrs. Pignataro, Mrs. Davies, and Mr. Kirschenberg, and Mr. Press, of course. Refit is an interesting organization. It is an organization that is 50 years old, and its sole purpose is to fix funding inequities in education. So you've heard me say from this microphone that mid-wealth districts like Lynbrook are frequently frozen out of appropriate aid. And I think there's certain images that people have of a district like Lynbrook that don't realize the heavy lifting that we're doing. And I think it really hit the bricks this year with our budget. So we had a hard time with this one. I'm happy to say I actually at one point said we weren't going to adopt in March. This is our traditional adoption date, but we will be presenting a balanced budget tonight. And I thank Mr. Press for his hard work. And just a note, now that they're out of the room, those of you that were at the budget session last week, I told you there were going to be tears because those are just some really fine educators, and not all of them were quite ready to go. And I think you saw that with your own eyes tonight. So we thank them. And I just had to tell that story that to a person. They came with that letter to say, I hope I saved somebody's job. And that is just as good as it gets. So I thank them, thank Mr. Kirschenberg for all the work that we've done. And now, Mr. Press, it's time to present a balanced budget.
All right, do my best. If you recall, again, as Mr. Belmont mentioned, we presented a budget that was not in balance last week. This was the budget that we presented. So the gap was about $225,000 as of last week. We were not in balance at that time. We were still digesting the responses that we got to the retirement incentive and seeing how that was going to affect the program. And at that point, we were analyzing and looking at any number of things. This is a slide also from last week. Some of the things that we could have considered to bridge the gap were piercing the tax cap, which we ruled out fairly quickly. Accessing positions, which again, we did not want to do. Both of these things were things that again are available to us, but that we really did not want to consider at all. So which left us really in the last week to look at reducing expenses and potentially utilizing additional reserves and fund balance. The last option up here is additional state aid, which the budget, we would need to wait for the state to adopt their budget. At the refit breakfast, to a person, every elected representative there said, yeah, there's not going to be an on-time budget this year. So I don't think there's going to be an on-time budget, so we can't wait around to see what they're going to give us. What we will do, and from what I'm reading, at least from the one House bills from the Assembly and the Senate, it sounds like there may be additional funding for us when they do finalize the budget, but that remains to be seen. The one House bills are their proposals. Things they propose do not always make it into the final budget. But we'll keep an eye on that and see if we need to come, if we get more revenue from the state, we can come back and present to you a revised revenue budget. Really, what the community votes on is the expense side of the budget, and what you adopt is the expense side of the budget. So this is our updated proposal. We looked at a number of different things. Part of the conversation last week was that our enrollment is declining and is projected to continue to decline over the next few years, and we're seeing that at the KC. Our numbers have been going down and they're lower. So this one's all on Dr. Berman because she looked at the busing for the KC, and where we had an increase there originally of $276,000 in the in-district budget. She was able to consolidate some of the kindergarten routes without really having any significant effect on the length of those routes, which saves us a big bus, and then the matron on that bus, for a recognized savings of about $118,000. So that obviously went a long way toward bridging that gap. I looked at my budget, and I had mentioned last week that our insurance rates had gone up quite a bit, that our assessment from the company that comes in every 5 years and does a physical inventory of our property and does an assessment of our buildings, some of the numbers they had there they had the incorrect square footage, and it was too high. So we went back, I had a conversation with them, they lowered the square footage to the actual correct numbers, which allowed us, this was our original increase in insurance, $293,000. Again, we went back and adjusted the square footage. That allowed us to save not quite what Dr. Berman had saved, and this is conservative. I didn't get a firm number from them. They're still working through that. As of yesterday, they said they're still processing the reports from the appraisal company. But based on my conservative estimate, we were able to save about $7,000 there. And so those savings, those are all in the central administration line in the budget, so you'll see that change there. So on the expense side of things, we're down about $125,000 on the expense side. So it doesn't get us to the 225. So the other part of this proposal that we're making is that we increase the appropriation from our TRS reserve by $100,000. Just originally last year when I had put in the use of the reserve from the TRS, it was actually at $700,000. We lowered it when the state aid numbers came back more favorable to us. So I lowered it from 700 to 660 last year. We're increasing that to 760. This is what we're proposing, pulling that out of reserves. So that would increase our overall total use of reserves, which then will show up here, increasing our local revenue projection by $100,000. So the two combined, the reduction of expenses of about $125,000 and the increase in the use of reserves helps us to bridge that gap. So that when we look at the full picture as a whole, our expenses going down, the local revenue going up, gets rid of our budget gap and gets us a balanced budget. And that's it. So I'll open the floor to questions at this point from the board.
I just have one question.
When I was at the breakfast last week, you know, the topic of federal funding and the Department of Education came up. Is there any status on that as far as like federal funding and our budget and?
So there's nothing yet. I know the House approved a spending package. Nothing's finalized yet. The Senate has its own package. They have to reconcile them. What I can say is that one of the organizations that we belong to, the Association of School Business Officials, so there's ASBO New York and then there's ASBO International. The ASBO International group has more of a national presence than the New York State group, and they have a monthly federal update, and they had one this week. And they stressed very heavily, don't freak out. The proposal, I think, from the House was a cut to IDEA, which is really the bulk of our federal funding is that IDEA, the special education grant. They said the proposal was to cut that by about $80 billion. The folks there, and these are the advocacy people, they said that's what they proposed last year, and the cut did not go through. They're not worried, they're not concerned that that cut will go through. So they seem fairly confident that the funding that we receive, we will continue to receive. It may look a little different. This is part of the conversation is, does the funding come to us, come to the states as a block grant, and then the states can do with it what they want, or does it stay the way it is? And that remains to be seen.
I just had a question. If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, when we started this process back in September, we were talking about a deficit closer to the $2.5 million number. Is that about what we were talking about? So it's not really so much a question as a compliment and a gratitude. First of all, compliments to the central administration team for putting this budget together. We'll find out a more public announcement probably next month, but Lynbrook got another reporting award from ASBO as far as our financial reporting, but it also goes to our financial planning. And so I just want to thank you for the hard work it took to get from $2+ million to $200,000. And a gratitude goes out to our LTA because their cooperation with the retirement incentive had a lot to do with being able to close that gap and keep our fresh young teachers who we want to be here for 30 years on staff. So a gratitude for that cooperation in closing the gap with the community. And then I guess I just hope that if the state does come through with additional aid, is it safe to assume that we'd most likely then use that to use fewer reserves on the revenue side?
That would be my intent, and I think Dr. Lynch, the same.
Thank you all. This, I know, was not easy to do, so thank you.
And again, a big thank you to the community. So to repeat myself again, we only have reserves because you allow us to have reserves. There are auditors who will say that that's bad public accounting, but if you don't have a savings account, what are you going to do on the rainy day? So we announced in September, we were seeing a yellow light, not a red light, a yellow light. So there are districts that get themselves in trouble at this time by not seeing the yellow light and just let it go to red. Thank God, am I allowed to say that? Thankfully, we were able to say that this community has given us the reserves, and that goes a way to cushion things that you've given us. So thank you, Lynbrook, for always being behind this budget, and we really hope you're going to be behind this budget again in May. So we greatly appreciate that. And I might as well go right with my superintendent's report. Oh, I'm sorry, you have more business to do. I'm sorry.
So moving on to new business, we have BOCES nominations. Mr. Lunar, you discuss, I think we have information on 2 of the 3 seats.
So every year, the BOCES board consists of 9 members. Every year, 3 different members are up for re-election. They serve on 3-year rotating terms, not dissimilar to how we do it here. For this upcoming year, we've received correspondence and resumes for 2 of the candidates whose terms are expiring, indicating an intent to run again. Their names are Fran Langsner and Robert Schoen. Both have been on the board for some time. I've gotten to speak with both in over some of the Zoom committee meetings we've had or some of the Zoom presentations. I'm happy to recommend that both be nominated for re-election.
Consensus on that is good, so let's do a quick resolution. Whereas the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District may nominate candidates for 3 vacancies to be filled on the Board of Cooperative Education Services of Nassau County, and be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Free Union School District at this time will nominate 2, Fran Langnorth and Robert Schoen. All in favor? Mrs. Donito, Mrs. Kelly? None opposed? So we'll do that, and then if we get further information on the third candidate, we'll discuss it then. Now, Dr. Lynch, you may do your superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Belmont. So just a brief update on our board goals. So as you know, our first board goal last year, this year, and probably next year and the year after that is the implementation of the profile of the owl. So we are about to launch something, officially announcing it tonight, that will be forming a professional development committee. So this will be a committee of administration and teachers who will be charting out the course of next year's professional development. If you've heard me at this microphone, and certainly the teachers in the audience have heard me, the only way to affect curricular change is to do it through teachers, because that's who's in front of children. So if we don't have teacher empowerment, we're not going to have a changed curriculum. We now know the mandate that the community has given us. We now know what the pillars of the profile of the owl are. We took a whole year to look at the profile and to do a deep dive in it together. Now next year it's time to get to more work, and what better way to do that than to form a professional development committee with the sole focus of the implementation on the profile of the owl. And that will include them helping us decide what Superintendent's Conference Day looks like, what the extended PD look like, and really move in that direction. So I'm very excited about that. I thank Dr. Belekas and Mr. McDermott and Mrs. Curran for their leadership, and we'll be convening that very shortly. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over for our UPK report to Dr. Berman.
Thank you. Lynbrook School District will continue to offer a universal pre-K program for the 25-26 school year. We anticipate receiving funding to offer approximately 156 eligible students full-day pre-K for next year, based on information contained in the proposed executive budget. The number of eligible students is contingent upon passage of the official New York State budget and corresponding per pupil allocations. The UPK program is open to children residing in the school district who turn 4 years old on or before December 1st of 2025. Eligible students must be born between December 2nd of 2020 and December 1st of 2021. This state-funded program allows a 180 school day calendar and runs 5 days a week from Monday through Friday from 9 to 2, beginning on September 4th of 2025. Transportation would not be provided. The Barry and Florence Friedberg Jewish Community Center, the JCC, is located at 1 Saperstein Plaza in Lynbrook, and Tiny Tykes Early Learning Center is located at 49 Blake Avenue in Lynbrook. They will both continue to operate the UPK programs for the upcoming school year. The district will conduct a virtual lottery on Thursday, April 24th at 10 a.m. Access to the online lottery application can be found on the district's website at lynbrookschools.org. Under the Parent-Student tab, at the very bottom, it will you'll locate the Universal Pre-K tab. Applications will only be accepted electronically. Proof of your child's birth and residency documents will need to be uploaded during this application process. The deadline to apply for the lottery is April 11th at 3 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Berman. And then Dr. Belekas on our summer programs.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. I'm happy to report that we had an excellent response to our initial Parent Square survey, and we will be offering all the summer programs that we initially proposed. That means that both North and South Middle Schools will be hosting summer playground, and additionally, at South Middle School only, we'll be hosting Right at School, Camp Invention, Literacy Lounge, and Math Quest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we might as well keep going with your curriculum update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Larkin. So on the screen here, we see these are our assessment results from last school year. I know it's almost assessment time for next year, but these results were recently published in the Herald, and I know that some of the results caused confusion, and I didn't want people walking away with a misunderstanding. So most of the results that came from the Herald talked about what happened in our Lynbrook buildings. The results that you see on the screen here are the actual results reported to the state for the entire district. So that would include both students in and out of district that are Lynbrook students. The big change that you see here is that in the newspaper, the grade 8 math scores were reported as very low. Actually, that's one of the strongest grade levels in the middle school. As you can see, that is the highest data point in the middle school. What the discrepancy is, each district has a certain number of children that are taking algebra in the accelerated classes. The initial number reported in the Herald did not account for that. When we look at the accountability measures in the state, that is accounted for. So when those kids are returned to the pool, the percentage passing goes up to 71%. You know, one of the things that you don't see when you just look at the graphic, though, is that in Lynbrook, and you know, this is a Long Island phenomenon that's continuing to happen, you don't see the numbers of children that are opting out. So you can see as we progress through the grades, a lot of times we've had really high percentages across the board. That has lessened over the years. You know, the younger grades do seem to opt out a little bit less than the middle schools. And you can see that both for the ELA and the math. Again, when we look at the opt-outs for the math assessment, the 23% overall in 8th grade is a little bit misleading here too, because the total number of test takers, no one was opting out of the algebra regions. So when you factor in the algebra regions there, the opt-out rate goes closer to 50%. So, you know, again, every time you look at a set of numbers, the problem with statistics is it's all in the eye of the beholder and how it's presented. So overall, though, what you can see are elementary numbers across the board. We're very strong. We do have some adjustments that we need to make in the middle school. I know we've talked about some of the programmatic changes over the last couple of meetings about the changes to AIS, how we're introducing humanities and STEM labs. So those are going to be things that are leveraged as we move forward. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? The scores for these, when do they typically come back? Is it still a delay like it's been in years past?
Yes, the scores are typically delayed. We don't get individual student reports until late summer, early fall, depending on the year. And, you know, that's why people do receive those reports in the next school year as opposed to the year that they sit for the assessment.
So it's good to say that the, you know, assessments we do in-house give teachers more accurate information that they can.
No, absolutely. And I will say that, you know, the assessments that we give in-house are what students are typically preparing for. You know, I hate to say this, these state assessments for certain kids, especially when you get into a middle school setting, it's a very difficult long haul for a middle school student to keep concentration for a full 2 days on a test that they know in their mind does not count. And I think that is something, unfortunately, that, you know, becomes a very middle school mindset. And, you know, that is something very different than when I know that this other score will be in power school and my parents will be able to see how I performed.
Well, you know my feeling on these tests. I've made them pretty clear over the years, so but thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Belekas, can I ask with the one, just to clarify with 8th grade?
Sure.
So those students in 8th grade who are accelerated, both by teacher identification and discussion with parents, who will take the algebra regions, they are not part of these numbers, correct? I know they were not part of.
They were not part of the Herald's numbers. They are part of these numbers, and I'll explain why. So what the government requires is that children are tested in ELA and mathematics in grades 3 through 8. But if you take one state assessment, they don't require you to take both, but you must report the results for whatever assessments they take, and that's all compiled together. So, you know, there are certain districts where there are more or less kids taking algebra, so that pool of eligible students changes. So in Lynbrook, it's always about a 50-50 split, give or take, in any given cohort. So, half of the children were, we'll call it, missing from the numbers. And if you look at that number up there, the 23%, you're talking about half of half. That's why I said about half of them opted out. So that's really the mathematics behind what's happening.
So then, just to clarify
Yes.
from a pedagogical standpoint, in doing that, we're actually serving the children as they need to be served in 8th grade. We're not
absolutely.
accelerating everyone when we're just setting them up to fail.
We are trying to prepare them properly to be successful in high school. And I think that's something that we've always tried in Lynbrook, is to meet the kids where they're at. I do know that there were many places before the Common Core, and we're putting everything in a time machine at this point, that tried acceleration for all. When the Common Core came in, and basically in mathematics in particular, accelerated every student, depending on your grade level, 1 or 2 school years worth of material, that acceleration for all model became a very heavy lift for many students. So that, giving them that choice and the option of challenging yourself at what you felt was an appropriate level is something that we worked on, for years here. And I think that is something that, has benefited the students, to try to give them a strong foundation for high school success.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One last question.
Yes.
Am I correct? We're moving the writing labs down to the middle school, correct?
Correct.
And when we look at particularly the math and science assessments, at least what the state has been sort of dribbling out to us, the English, the reading skills that are necessary to succeed on those tests, make it just really underscore the point to move the writing lab to the middle school level.
Yeah, I
Correct, as
will
I
say,
understand
and
it.
I know this is tough for people to understand, but the most difficult reading tests that children are ever going to sit for are the new science exams. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about our youngins in 5th grade or our older students in 8th in the high school. Those tests are all becoming high-level literacy exams. And if anybody has listened, and I'm not trying to make fun of Mr. Belmont or Dr. Lynch here, to some of the science projects that we have to read out from time to time, all the kids are doing readings with those type of words in there, which is not the easiest words to work with on a page. And I will tell you, it is one of those things that becomes very frustrating for children. And if you look at the 5th grade assessment, and I know that you have a background in science, so why do we have to name things with genus and species when they're in 5th grade? When those names are based on the Latin versions of words, that's a heavy lift for any 5th grader to have to deal with, when they could just be talking about the butterfly's life cycle.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That brings me to 2 more questions, sorry.
Absolutely.
For the science test, will those results in addition not be back in time to be drive instruction? Is this the 2nd year of that?
Well, the thing about the science assessment, and it's very different than the others in the sense that we only offer state assessment-wise the 5th grade assessment, because our students are pretty much in the living environment right now or the earth science class. So it is only the 5th grade assessment results, and how much the elementary school results would ever, impact the middle school. It's a very different program. The one thing about science, again, in the elementary and the intermediate level, it's what I would call like a smorgasbord of science. So you do a little bit of what I'll call
It's cycles.
pre-physics, pre-chemistry, pre-biology, pre-earth science, and that's what builds the courses. So again, they're going to go through a whole nother cycle. The one good thing is, and this is one of the nice parts about the curriculum, the way we have it set up here, is everything is taught at the lower level. They get introduced to a concept, and they spiral it up as they go through the system, elementary to intermediate to high school.
Okay, and my final question is, talking about the math, we've done a deep dive into our ELA curriculum in, the kindergarten with the sounds right and changing over, and the sentence writing, which I'm blanking on the word. for it right now, but we've really looked into that a lot to help all students and especially those struggling. Have we evaluated, and how often do we look at our math program to make sure that we're really setting the foundation for our students to understand, base 10 and to carry them through, and just how often is that process?
Yeah, I will say that we've done a very good job at the elementary school of data collection and basically what I'll call an RTI process. One of the things that we're looking at right now is moving toward an MTSS process. So what the big difference is for, folks that are not in the educational field, I know you understand this, but I figured for other people's edification, we talk a lot about English and math. Once we add in MTSS, we're looking at that kid as a whole. So there will be a whole SEL component as well. And when we're doing that, we're going to try to expand the RTI process more into the middle school. Because again, if you look at the results, and I know I may not be as good at going backwards quickly here. You can see at the elementary level, those foundational math results are phenomenal.
Okay.
We do need to do a better job at raising some of those foundational skills in the middle school for the high school. So yes, hopefully bringing that RTI MTSS process up the ladder will help with that as well.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Belekas, may I just
Yes.
jump in? For those who are watching at home who don't know the alphabet soup of
Sorry.
education, do you mind just clarifying for everyone what we mean when we say RTI and
Sure. So,
MTSS?
yeah, so RTI was probably brought in, I want to say, about 15 to 17 years ago, we started introducing RTI in the district. So what that is called, it's called response to intervention. We use a data-driven instruction approach at the elementary school. We give kids universal screenings where we see how they compare nationally in both ELA and mathematics. For kids that are not at the average or better, points in particular, we do a lot of deep data diving, which means that we call it progress monitoring to see, are you making basically incremental gains to start closing the achievement gap from where you are to where we want you to be. So that is something that's been going on for years. MTSS builds off of that. That's a multi-tiered system of supports. And I know that as Dr. Lynch had mentioned before, my partner on all this stuff, Mrs. Curran, is always preaching to everyone, there is this thing called ready to learn. And if kids aren't being met with their social emotional needs, they're not accessing those tests for the English and the math. And that's why we do need to look at them as a whole and chart the growth in all those areas simultaneously, and that is the direction we're moving. And I do have to give Mrs. Boyce a lot of credit. She's in the back of the cafeteria right now. She's helping spearhead that effort right now on the SEL side and helping us get that plan starting to roll into action. Thanks.
Dr. Belekas, I would also just like to say, especially to the parents out there listening, that when you see results like this, we just need to take a deep breath and realize why they tend to be a tiny bit skewed as well. Because Lynbrook, when all these ridiculous assessments were, introduced to the state, we led the charge in opt-outs. I mean, we are one of the communities that have the most amount of students opting out traditionally, if I'm not mistaken. And which makes sense considering how many educators we have in this town, and educators tended to lead that charge, because if you really understand what these things are about, they're not really about the kids, they're about, assessing how well teachers teach. And one assessment is not a good way of assessing how teachers teach. But with that being said, traditionally the students who opt out, if I'm not mistaken, tend to be students who have heavy parental involvement. And those students tend to be your stronger students, if I'm not also mistaken. So how skewed are these numbers if the kids who tend to do very well on these assessments are the kids who opt out of these assessments? So,
well, I will say that before the opt-out movement started, I reported state assessment results all the time. And, why? The whole populace took it. And it was a legitimate measure of what the district to district did, because all the kids were involved, and there weren't any of these, what I'll call ancillary conversations that happen. And I'm not talking among the adults. I'm talking about among the children. And that's why when you get into middle school, it's a very hard thing to decipher, was it because the kids didn't know the material, or was it because the kids see some empty seats around them and say, yes, I know I have to sit for the assessment because I was told I have to sit for the assessment. However, I'm not as motivated here as I may be in another venue. And I think that is always very hard to tease out, and how that comes into play, it's not something we can say cleanly anymore. I have to give credit, our teachers have always taken pride in their work here. And it doesn't matter if the kids are opting out or not. They've always tried to prepare the kids in their subject areas as best they could. And yes, when we had the whole populace taking it, our results were always up there with the best of the best.
Thank you.
Right. I mean, I think the point is that, we have these results and they're a snapshot, but they're really not remotely an effective tool to assess our teachers internally, certainly, or even our students, right? We have a number of mitigating factors. You have the opt-out movement, which, as Mr. Pileski said, really does sometimes self-select out the kids who are most likely to do well on these tests to some extent. You have the fact that kids realize that so many others opted out that these tests have no meaning and they don't count for them personally, so they just blow them off. So, I hear what everyone's saying, and I think I just want to join in that these are numbers, but they're not really the best way to assess our students. And I think that's the problem with these types of tests, and that's why there's so much criticism of them. And I think internally we do a really good job of assessing our students in so many other ways, whether it's through final exams, projects, classwork, that, to me, I put a lot more weight in what the teachers are doing to assess their students than on these types of exams.
Yeah, I think, again, one of the best ways to assess how the kids perform is seeing them day in and day out. And I know that we've given a couple of snippets of things that have happened in our classrooms. I know that we've projected a lot. I know Mrs. Danilo mentioned about the reading and the writing. We have been putting a lot of faces on the screen showing how the program works, because, I don't have state assessments at that level. I don't need a state assessment to validate a program like that. I need you to see, look at what these kids are doing right now. And I think, that same kind of conversation happens at all levels in this district. And like you said, as they get older, the work that they're able to produce, I think that's a testament to what they have learned.
And just to be clear, in Lynbrook, we don't use these assessments to drive instruction or to decide on advanced placement or anything like that.
No, so what happens in Lynbrook, we have something called open enrollment. So people can choose what pathways they want their children to follow. So you can choose to accelerate yourself in one course and not in another. So you have all those type of options. We do not bind you to these assessments. We also collect our own data points, because one of the things about AIS, and AIS has been around for 25, 26 years.
Academic intervention.
I'm sorry?
Academic intervention.
Yes, academic intervention services. And I think actually the other day, Dr. Lynch and I had a memo from Commissioner Mills back then at the time, who laid out the foundation for those services. And, like I said, almost 25, 26 years ago. And that hasn't changed, that you're supposed to look at multiple measures. You don't want to just make a kid a one-day test that, as Mr. Pileski said, it may or may not reflect their ability. And, there are certain kids that show up for the assessment and, the stamina just is not there. And it's very different. And this is one of those things about standardized testing, especially when you're talking about elementary and middle school kids. We teach them every day to be sprinters, and then you put them in a marathon. So certain kids can respond to that, and others, that's not the way they've been trained. And I will say, one of the things that I give, again, a lot of credit to the high school folks, when we have the older kids and we put them in front of another marathon test called the AP exam, a lot of them are doing review classes where the kids are sitting for full-length exams beforehand just to sit for that experience of having to sit there and focus for that long at a high level. And I do think that's really benefited our kids, and why many of them do well on those exams, because it is a big difference between going from a 40-minute test to something that, again, they said that they were making it easier for kids by making them untimed. But when you make them untimed, some kids are sitting there all day long, which is another issue for, many kids.
And I think just one more thing to put in perspective, it kind of piggybacks off of Mr. Pileski and Mr. Lunar and what Dr. Black has just said about AP exams. Ultimately, we have a 13, and when you consider UPK a 14-year journey for our students, this is the middle at best. And I think our results based on our graduation rates, based on our AP exams, based on our Regents exams, I mean, that's the proof in the pudding that our schools are doing what they need to do to prepare students for the world. So I think we just have to also remember that this is like, I don't even know a good analogy for it, but we're talking about seeing how we're doing at the beginning of the race, and there's still 15 miles to go.
Yeah, and just actually piggybacking off of what Mr. Murray said, you look where these kids finish, not where they start or not where they are on mile 2 of a 5-mile race. Look at some of the schools that our kids are getting into. Look at how they're doing on AP exams and on some of the, I know standardized tests are not in vogue right now, but on ACT and SAT, we have a ton of kids. I mean, I only know this anecdotally because I happen to have a kid who's in the graduating class, but we have a ton of kids who are hitting it out of the park on these exams. So obviously they're getting educated fairly well on ELA and math because that's what they test on those 2 exams. And we have, I could think of 25 kids who broke 1,400. I mean, we're doing something right here, and that, you know, a 1-year blip on these charts really shouldn't be an indictment of, you know, how we're doing to educate our teachers or our students. So.
And I do just want to add something to the conversation. I'm just going to, I agree with everything being said here, but at the same time, I do think it is time to take a fresh look at our academic intervention services. It's almost like the same conversation we were having about regionalization a couple of weeks ago. When the state says you must do it, we're going to get our backs up. Do we need to take a look at how we're examining data systematically at our middle schools? It's probably a good time to take a look at that and what measures we should be using and how we can progress monitor as just a natural part of doing education, and to inform our program and to take high achievement to even the next level. So I think, you know, that's part of the profile of the OWL, is that we do want to do something in regard to rigor at middle school. It's kind of what we've heard from the parents. It's what we've heard from the community, and it's not because of this chart. I just want to be very clear. It's not because of this chart. It's because it's an important era to just rethink it every couple of years. And I think now's we're looking at the whole system. We might as well be looking at it at this point. It's an interesting time of life, those 3 grades in middle school. There's a lot going on. And I think that's where you put the readiness for learning on the SEL, along with some of their academic performance and all the other stuff that's going on. I give you credit for doing that every day of your life, Mrs. Kelly. And love it. I think they assigned me to 7th grade one year. I cried. No, I love that. But no, I just think there's some also authentic challenges, and I think we're up to those challenges. But because we want to do it, not necessarily because there's a blip on the radar. So I'll now turn it over to Mr. Press on capital projects.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. So we do have some progress on our capital projects. The projects that we had sent up to the state as part of third-party review have been reviewed by the third-party reviewer and comments sent back to our architect. Our architect is reviewing and preparing responses to those comments. The architect's comments should be submitted by the end of this week. Assuming we get no further comments back from the third-party reviewer, we anticipate having approval of the projects by the end of this month, beginning of next month. Once we have that approval, we will plan to go out to bid so that we can, our intent is to have that work done this summer. In terms of the door replacement projects at West End and Marion Street, that is also moving along. We have a meeting this Friday with our contractors and our architect to go over timelines and our expectations and logistics. We do anticipate the preliminary wiring for the wireless door locks to actually start before the summer, because that is work that can happen potentially over the April break or in evenings, so that once the doors start to actually get installed, and the wireless door locks get installed, the wiring is already there, so they should get up and running much faster. And then just finally, the third part of that door project and what went up to the state along with the door projects was the high school elevator cab replacement. That is also on schedule to occur this summer. And that's my update.
Thank you for all that. This time we'll move to public comment. If anybody wants to address the board, please come up to the podium, identify yourself, and indicate if you live in or out of district. Seeing no commentary, we have one sympathy resolution this evening for Raquel Packus. Whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the passing of Raquel Packus, former employee in the Lynbrook School District. And whereas Raquel Packus served as a foreign language teacher at Lynbrook High School for 26 years, from 1968 through 1995, and whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Mrs. Packus during her years of service to our community, be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Raquel Packus was held, and be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Raquel Packus with the hope that they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which she is remembered and revered. The board gratefully acknowledges and accepts the following donations: $1,420 from the Waverly Park PTA for assemblies, $304 from the Lynbrook West End PTA for the Phyllis Rose Dance Student Assembly. On consent agenda, I'd like to ask for consent agenda on resolutions 2503C1 through 250321, 2503NC1 through 2503NC5, and 2503G2 and 2503G28. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Murray, second. Mrs. Danino, all in favor? May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mrs. Kelly, second. Mr. Luna, all in favor? Our next meeting will be the BOCES budget meeting and regular meeting on Wednesday, April 23rd, after the break. That concludes our meeting.